So, you want to dive into the self-simulation hypothesis. Get ready because we're going deep into theoretical physics, philosophy, even maybe like touch on some occult stuff.
Yeah, it's a wild ride. It really makes you question, like, everything you think you know about reality, right?
Right. For this deep dive, we're looking at this YouTube interview between Robert Edward Grant and Irwin. They're talking about this pretty mind-blowing theory.
And Irwin's background makes it even more interesting.
Totally.
He's not like your average physicist.
Right.
He was actually a super successful entrepreneur, before getting into physics research later in life.
Yeah, I read that he even like founded the Quantum Gravity Research Institute. They've even published stuff in, real peer-reviewed journals.
It's impressive.
It's pretty amazing, right? And what got him into all this is so wild. He talks about these supernatural experiences he had, like when he was 44. It totally changed his whole path.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he felt like he was getting information from like future versions of himself and his friends.
Well,
They were telling him, to explore this like new cosmological model.
it makes you wonder, right, about like those kinds of experiences, Imagine being Irwin, right? He had this like successful career and then suddenly, boom, his whole understanding of reality is like flipped upside down.
I know.
I mean, talk about motivation to start, digging for answers.
Yeah, totally. So that's what he did. But before we get too deep into his theory, let's talk about the simulation hypothesis. Most people have at least, heard of that,
Right.
right? The idea that we're all like living in this super advanced computer simulation created by like a more advanced civilization.
Right. It's a popular idea, especially in science fiction.
Yeah.
But Irwin says even the simulation hypothesis is limited by what he calls the dirty little secret of materialism.
Okay, so what's so dirty about materialism?
Well, it's this assumption that reality at its core is made of matter and energy. It's kind of the foundation of classical physics. But Irwin's like, nope. He points to quantum mechanics, which suggests that reality is actually fundamentally made of information.
Okay, I see where this is going. So instead of a computer simulation, he's saying it's more like a simulation running on like consciousness itself.
Yeah, exactly. That's the self-simulation hypothesis.
Yeah.
We exist within a mental simulation run by like this vastly more complex consciousness, maybe even like a godlike consciousness.
Okay, now that is like a mind-blowing concept.
Right.
But if that's true, how could we ever like prove or disprove it? I mean, how would we even know for sure?
Well, that's kind of the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
The challenge, like the whole idea of what we can even know, what counts as proof.
And it makes you think about things like, dreams and how real they can feel, right? Like, could those be glimpses into like other parts of this simulation? Or maybe even like glitches in the matrix?
Now you're thinking like Irwin. He uses this theory to try and explain like all sorts of seemingly impossible stuff.
So how does this all connect to his own research? This emergence theory he's developed?
So emergence theory is like Irwin's specific version of the self-simulation hypothesis. He sets it out as a series of axioms, like building blocks for understanding how this whole reality thing works.
Thanks. I love a good framework.
Right.
So what's the first axiom?
The first one is all is thought. Irwin argues that just like, quantum mechanics says reality is fundamentally information, well, information itself implies consciousness. So like at the most basic level, everything is thought.
Whoa, so even a rock, like something that seems totally inanimate, has some form of consciousness, that's pretty different from how we usually see the world.
Totally. It makes you rethink what we consider alive or conscious, right? Maybe consciousness isn't something that just like appears at a certain level of complexity. Maybe it's always there, just, expressed in different ways. Yeah, it kind of blurs the lines, huh? Okay, so moving on to the next axiom of emergence theory, finiteness.
Okay.
Irwin says that even like a godlike consciousness, if that's what's running this whole simulation, it isn't actually infinite.
Okay.
It's constantly like expanding and growing.
Well, even like godlike consciousness has limits. That's an interesting idea. It implies like a kind of dynamism to reality.
Yeah.
It's not just static.
Exactly. It's not fixed. It's a process. It's creation. It's expansion.
So what's the next piece of the puzzle?
The code theoretic axiom.
Okay.
So Irwin thinks that reality is built on a kind of language, like a finite set of symbols and rules.
Like a code underlying everything.
Yeah, kind of like that. Just like DNA has a code, that determines our like biological traits.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. And just like DNA, the code of reality would have its own like rules and instructions for how things work.
Gotcha. So that leads to the principle of efficient language, right?
Right.
The next axiom.
Right.
So what's efficient language in this context?
Okay, so Irwin says this godlike consciousness, if it exists, would be driven to create the most complex reality, but using the least amount of code.
Like a programmer, like
Yeah.
trying to optimize their software.
Yeah, exactly, like a master programmer. So it's all about like elegance and simplicity at the heart of it all.
I kind of like that. It makes sense, you know.
Right. Okay, and then the final axiom is probably the most mind-bending,
Lay it on me.
retrocausality.
Retrocausality. Okay, that sounds intense. What does that even mean?
It means that cause and effect, they're not just linear, they can actually flow in both directions.
Hold on. Are we talking time travel here? Because that's like a whole other can of worms.
Not really time travel in the like traditional sense. Think of it more like a feedback loop between the past, present, and future. They're all interconnected, influencing each other.
So our choices today could actually ripple back in time and change things that have already happened.
That's what it suggests, yeah. It
Yeah.
really challenges how we think about time, like our whole linear understanding.
Right. And if we connect this back to the listener, it means they're not just passively watching this reality. Their thoughts and choices actually have a ripple effect, not just on the future, but maybe even the past.
It's a pretty profound idea, yeah. And it leads us to another fascinating aspect of Irwin's work, which is his exploration of the connection between the structure of reality and prime numbers.
Prime numbers. Okay, you get to walk me through this one slowly. Math is not my strong suit. What do prime numbers have to do with, the nature of reality?
It's a question that's fascinated mathematicians for centuries. Prime numbers, the ones only divisible by one in themselves, they seem to follow a pattern, but nobody's been able to figure it out.
Yeah, I remember prime factorization in school. I was so lost. It just seemed so random.
And that randomness, or apparent randomness, is what Irwin is trying to figure out. He thinks the distribution of prime numbers could be the key to understanding the universe's deepest secrets. He even uses geometric shapes to represent numbers, calling them simplex integers.
So instead of abstract numbers, we're talking shapes.
Yeah.
That's a interesting way to look at it.
It is. And it helps him see patterns and relationships that are hard to see with, regular math.
And this is where his research at the Quantum Gravity Research Institute comes in.
Yeah.
They're using an 8-dimensional crystal to model the fundamental particles of reality. So how does that connect to prime numbers? Because I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that.
It's complicated, but I'll try my best. Okay, so imagine this 8-dimensional crystal. It's kind of like a blueprint for reality. It has this very specific structure, and Irwin thinks this structure is deeply connected to prime numbers, like they're reflections of the underlying geometry of the universe.
So prime numbers aren't just some abstract mathematical concept. They're literally woven into the fabric of reality.
That's what he's saying. And understanding the patterns of prime numbers could be cracking a code. It could help us understand how everything works.
This is all pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But how does it connect to us, to our everyday lives,
Yeah.
Does it have any, practical implications?
Well, that's where Irwin and Grant's conversation gets philosophical. They both believe in the idea of a higher self,
Okay.
like the idea that we as individual consciousnesses chose to experience this limited reality for the sake of novelty and growth.
So we're like players in a game, kind of. Choosing to forget we're playing so we can experience, the thrill of discovery and challenge.
Exactly. We put on blinders to fully immerse ourselves. And Irwin and Grant, they use this beautiful analogy to explain it, kintsugi.
I love kintsugi. It's that Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold. Right?
Yeah, highlighting the cracks instead of hiding them.
Right.
And they see it as a metaphor for our own experiences. All the pieces, even the painful ones, are ultimately part of something bigger, something beautiful. They make the whole thing more complex and rich.
So even our struggles, our imperfections, they're all part of the beauty of this grand simulation. That's kind of comforting.
Yeah, it is. It suggests that every experience, every choice, every interaction, it all matters. It all contributes to the evolution of consciousness.
It's a very different way of looking at reality than the traditional view, right?
Yeah.
It's not just this cold deterministic machine, but a constantly evolving, tapestry woven from thought, experience, interconnectedness. It's almost poetic.
And in this reality, a godlike consciousness isn't just watching from afar. It's an active participant, experiencing itself through us, the avatars, so to speak.
Wow. That's a pretty awe-inspiring idea. It really changes how we think about who we are, our place in all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes you like rethink everything, doesn't it? I mean, if we're all just like parts of this larger consciousness, playing out in this simulated reality, what does that even mean for the concept of God?
It's definitely one of the tougher parts of this whole thing for people to grasp.
Right.
It's pretty different from the like traditional view of God, right? Like the one who creates the universe out of nothing.
So how does the self-simulation hypothesis like deal with the idea of God? Is there even room for God in this whole framework?
No, there is, but it's a very different kind of God. It's
Okay.
not a God separate from creation.
Yeah.
Like in the self-simulation hypothesis, God is like an integral part of the simulation itself, always evolving, experiencing itself through everything it creates.
Hmm.
So instead of a creator God, it's more like God is an emergent property of the simulation.
Exactly. And remember that finiteness principle we talked about. That applies here too. Like this godlike consciousness, it's not infinite, but it's always expanding, always trying to like maximize its complexity and experience, but using the most efficient code.
Right, like that principle of efficient language, right? A drive toward like elegance and optimization.
Exactly. It's a fascinating concept, this idea of a finite but ever expanding God.
It definitely challenges a lot of like traditional religious ideas, but it also kind of resonates with those who see the universe as this process of constant creation and transformation, a dynamic interplay of like thought, consciousness, and experience.
Yeah, totally. One thing that really struck me in Irwin's conversation with Grant was this idea of the eight-dimensional crystal and how it connects to prime numbers.
Oh yeah, that's where I started to like really lose it. How do you even begin to connect an eight-dimensional crystal to something as abstract as prime numbers?
Well, Irwin's team at the Quantum Gravity Research Institute is using this crystal, which is based on something called the E8 lattice, to model the fundamental particles of reality.
We're talking about like the building blocks of matter and energy,
Yeah.
right? Quarks, electrons, all that.
Exactly. And they believe that the structure of this crystal, with all its like crazy geometric relationships, is deeply connected to prime numbers. Like the distribution of primes actually reflects the underlying geometry of reality.
So prime numbers aren't just like some math puzzle, but fundamental pieces of the universe's structure.
That's the idea. And if we can like crack the code of prime numbers, we might unlock a deeper understanding of the universe's fundamental laws and how they relate to consciousness.
Irwin also mentioned something called simplex integers, right? Which are like geometric representations of integers. How do those fit in?
So simplex integers are basically a way to visualize numbers as shapes. And this can help us see like hidden relationships and patterns. It's like looking at the universe through a geometric lens. And this could offer a whole new perspective on prime numbers and their role in the structure of reality.
It's kind of amazing to think that math, something so abstract, could hold the key to understanding like the nature of reality itself.
Yeah, it is. And it shows how everything's interconnected. Math, physics, consciousness, it's all part of the same grand tapestry.
So if reality is truly a self-simulation, a mental construct within this higher consciousness, what does that mean for us, like in our everyday lives?
Well, it suggests that our thoughts, our choices, our experiences, they're not just like random events. They're all vital parts of this big simulation. We're active participants in this whole cosmic story.
So it's not just about like a materialistic view of reality. It puts consciousness front and center.
And if reality is fundamentally thought, like Irwin says, then our thoughts and intentions become even more important.
Yeah. It's empowering and like humbling at the same time.
Anyway.
It makes you realize we're all connected and like even our smallest actions, even our thoughts
Yeah.
can ripple out and affect the fabric of reality.
Absolutely. It encourages us to be more aware, more intentional, to realize we're not just watching this reality unfold, but we're actively creating it.
This has been a wild deep dive. It's given me so much to think about. What about you, dear listener? Where does all this leave you?
We hope this exploration of the self-simulation hypothesis has sparked your curiosity and given you a fresh perspective on things. Remember, this is just the beginning. There's always more to explore, more to question, more to discover. And we encourage you to keep going, delve deeper into Irwin's work, ponder the mysteries of consciousness and the nature of reality. And who knows, maybe you'll even come up with your own mind-blowing theories about how it all works.